Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Business is reopened. That means politics is reopened. We are here joined by the person kind of sits at the center of that, cattle farmer, businessman, and Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Missouri, Mike Kehoe.
Hey, it's great to be on with you today.
Start off with the important stuff. How's cattle business?
Well, it's tough right now, as any producer watching will know. Lightweight cattle, which is what we're in. We have a mama cow operation, so we sell our steers in the 6-weight range. Prices are incredibly low right now, almost historically low. The weird thing is beef prices at the grocery store case are almost incredibly an all-time high. So there's a big discrepancy on why a producer like myself is getting record low dollars and then somebody who is processing the beef is getting record high dollars. So there's multiple folks on multiple levels of government looking into that. But at the end of the day, the short story is there's only 4 finishers in this country, and 2 of them are Faughn owned. And so it's an interesting market when 4 people are commanding all that. So we'll get to the bottom of that at some point in time.
Let's talk about the rest of the state's economy. So there's no restrictions from the state anymore. If
Correct.
a lot of local jurisdictions have some restrictions. How far off is Missouri's economy and where it should be right now?
Well, we got some early sales tax numbers yesterday for June that showed an uptick over the same period last year for the first 2 weeks of June. So it's a small, but it's a promising sign. We'll take baby steps right now in our economy. Missourians are ready to get out and about. I think most Missourians, no matter what part of the state you've lived in, they've learned a little bit about social distancing and cleanliness of hands and the basic sanitary things that our mother taught us when we were young. Really came back to play the last 120 days. So I know the governor and I want people to get out and about. We want them to be careful. We want them to be cautious. We understand that COVID hasn't just gone away. It's still in our society and our state. But we need to also understand the effects it has on employment and the economy and let people get out safely and start getting back to work.
I mean, when you look at the numbers, the folks watching this on MediaCom in Central Missouri, where you're from, that includes Columbia, where the campus is of the college. That's the state capital. That includes the lake, where all the much maligned folks. There you had about 700 people get sick, and you had, 7 die, according to the numbers from the state. That's not a pandemic. That's a pandemic in other places, but those folks, there's no real reason for you to use any more than the common sense stuff you just talked about concern.
Well, every death should be taken seriously in the state, and I know the governor takes that very seriously. But to your point, I mean, at some point in time, when you look at other natural causes of death, death from influenza, death from car accidents, et cetera, unfortunately, suicide rates spiked in many parts of the country through the closure. So, those are all the things you have to consider as you're looking at this. And I think the governor, with a lot of advice from an incredible amount of experts, made a good decision to get us open back up and then leave local control. He's a big believer in local control. If there's some communities that believe they're not quite ready to get to that step, he's put the authority in their hands, and they can do as they think is best for their communities.
I think at first there were some folks, I had Frank White on last week, when he first said local control, they were like, oh, really? Because that's not always the case coming out of Jefferson City. But I think when he showed that he meant it, they kind of took it and ran with it. Like you mentioned earlier, you were in downtown St. Louis. Mayor Cruzen has some restrictions in place. They're data-driven. There's some reasons for those restrictions. But if you're in downtown Fredericktown, there's no reason to put restrictions on any Missourian.
Right. In Cole County, for instance, we've had 57 cases. 1 is still active. Over Memorial Day, I participated in a great Memorial Day event in Laclede County down in Lebanon. They'd had 2 cases the entire time over the 90-day period. So what their cautious nature is versus downtown St. Louis or downtown Kansas City are really 2 different things. And by the way, both of those probably practices are correct given the areas that they're working in and what the breakout in cases were in their respective areas.
I participated in the great Memorial Day event at Lake of the Ozarks, where all the pearl clutching and the predictions of doom and gloom hit, and none of them hit.
So you were responsible for all that?
Sure, absolutely. The great economic activity and people going back to work, you can put it all on me. And I something tells me, I see protesting, it's a very valid reason to protest. But if your science is dependent on your politics, it's not science.
Well, one thing the media didn't report out of those, that one crowded picture, 2 crowded pictures around a couple of bar scenes at the lake is those same bars were taking people's temperature when they walked in. They were maybe not using enough precautionary measures to make everybody happy, but certainly they were doing some things to try to take into account the situation we're in. And as you said, we're way past 2 weeks now, and we haven't seen the massive outbreak that the national media predicted.
One of those things, when you're down at the farm in Jerome, you go to the grocery store in Waynesville. I think people are pretty common sense and smart. And if they know, they hear the government, they hear what they're saying. But at the end of the day, if it's wrong to be to not social distance to go to the lake or wherever you want to go to a rally, and all of a sudden it is right to do it at a protest, I think that hits folks just in their gut a little wrong. I think they start to not trust it, which is very dangerous. If the public health experts start to lose the trust or they think this is political, that's very bad. What if there is a second wave that does hit Oregon County?
Yeah, you've seen plenty of a double standard out of the reporting from the media here, and I think it's become very apparent to people, and it doesn't matter if you're from rural or urban or Democrat or Republican. If you just watch some of the double standard you're seeing during this time, it's become very evident to most folks.
Let's talk tourism. That's something in the purview of your office. You said something months ago. You came in and answered some questions on Facebook for our readers on the Missouri Times website. There was a thing you said that a lot of folks may not have the money to go take a big trip to Florida or to wherever, but they might not have the time to get away from work, but they might kind of focus on some day trips around Missouri. How's that going?
Well, Missouri's in a perfect spot for what we call staycations. There's a couple of things that will really help Missourians and our surrounding states visit our state. The factors are people aren't 100% comfortable traveling on airlines. I know some people are, but not everybody is at that point where they're comfortable. Gas prices are low, and Missourians don't have the budget that they might have had to take a 10-day trip to go somewhere else. So taking a 3 to 5 day trip here in Missouri and seeing some of the great assets we have is unbelievable. This past week we were in Kimmswick, Missouri, visiting the Blue Isle down there with Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman and Senator Whelan.
Slice of pie?
Oh, everything's good in Kimmswick, Missouri, trust me. My wife and I, Johnson Shut-In State Park with the Missouri Adventure Trailer. So we're promoting our state parks and telling people to get out and about. Tourism, as you know, is number 2 in our state's economy with a $17.8 billion impact on our state. Those tourism operators, many of family-owned, have really taken it on the chin the last 90 days. And so for us to promote our state and encourage Missourians to safely get out and experience some of these great locations is something we're looking forward to do.
2 weeks ago on Sunday, I tried to take the kids down to Don Robinson State Park, and this was about 9:30 in the morning. There was a line. The park was full, couldn't accept any more folks. A line probably 3 miles long of cars waiting to get in.
Most people don't realize Missouri is one of the few states, our state parks are still free. Most state parks just a drive-in in other states. There's some nominal charge, but there is a charge to go in state parks in other states. So our state parks are still free. People can enjoy them. We have a great park system. DNR, Carol Comer and her group do a great job of running our state parks. And as you know, we're a big promoter of those, along with our private assets, a lot of great tourism assets around the state, to just get people out and about and do those, 2, 3, maybe 4 day trips. Save a little bit of money, go somewhere where you can drive within 100 miles, and you'll have a great experience with your family.
Let's talk while you're here. Let's talk a little politics. You get around the state as much as anybody that I know. I was in Cass County this past week, and I got to say, that Cass County is kind of a split county, a little bit like Jefferson County. You have Harrisonville South is more Missouri, Harrisonville, Belton, Peculiar North is pretty Missouri, but I think the president's holding pretty well in that southern part of Cass County.
Yeah, President Trump, obviously, one thing about him is he hasn't changed at all in 3.5 years. And so folks are, looking at the policies and conservative nature that he's put in place and quite frankly looking at the alternative. And the alternative is scary. It was scary back in 2016. I think where our country would be if folks would have went the other way was probably not as good a path as we've been on now with our economic recovery, et cetera. And I think the choice will be clear again in November.
To me, there's that group in the middle, right? There's you see the ultra crazies on Twitter and social media that if you watch, I think a rational person watched the murder of George Floyd and your heart broke. But I think also you watch in Seattle where they've let anarchists just take over downtown, and you're alarmed. I think that when Trump's alone, it's easy to judge him, but when you judge him against what another person would do, I think you're going to see some people come home. And in Missouri, what do you think that looks like? 8 to 10 points for Trump?
That's the numbers I've been seeing lately.
Yeah.
But the one thing we saw with President Trump is that there's people that come out and vote for him that the pollsters for some reason can't find.
Or they tell the pollster they're not doing it.
Right. They just won't take the poll, or they're people who have been one of these folks, you and I have both met them, who say, I don't vote anymore, it doesn't do any good. Well, now they're starting to see that it can do good. So it's a person maybe that hasn't voted in the last couple cycles. Pollsters aren't calling him, right, because they're not on the rolls, but they're going out and voting for Donald J. Trump, and I think you're going to continue to see that.
How's your race looking?
Well, it's looking good. We're working hard. We have the primary coming up here in August, and several folks on the ballot for that. So we're going to work to do our best to win the primary and then work on the election in November. Again, we'll have a couple of different candidates on there. There's only one Green Party, one Libertarian, so we know they'll be on in November. There's 2 Democrats, so one of those 2 will come out victorious, and we hope to be the Republican that comes out victorious in August, and we'll face off in November.
So you say Trump wins maybe a little south of 10 points, somewhere around there. Where does that put the governor?
I think the governor's doing hard. You know, you say I travel the state and work hard. Mike Parson works hard.
Yeah.
And you know that. You know him and you see where he goes. And the governor is really trying to stay in touch with people. I think overall, you know, history will end up grading him and all of us, quite frankly, on how we handled this COVID pandemic. But I think he's done a good job, and I think Missourians think it has been pretty much a balanced, kind of a show-me solution. And so I think that they'll look back at that and say, you know, the guy tried to take public health in mind, but also understand people's liberties, try to straddle that fence and keep it in the right direction. Many other folks around the United States that I know of, other lieutenant governors, are envious of how Missouri has handled this, and I think that will reflect well for him in November as well.
You know, you lose sight sometimes when you look at your Facebook page and try to see. My nephew Grant's birthday was this past weekend, so I look on Facebook and see a picture of the party, and it's filled with love Trump, hate Trump, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a rational Missourian in Franklin County somewhere that will be glad that their governor wasn't trying to run for president. He wasn't trying to get Facebook likes. He wasn't trying to score points for his party, or he wasn't trying to show up the president by running against his party. He just tried to do what he thought was right. And whatever he thought of Parsons' decisions, I think those were made what he thought was the best interest of the state.
Listen, I've told many people this over the past several months, is that politicians in elected office get criticized for decisions they make. Sure. It's part of what we know going into, you know, you listen to the big money guy, you listen to special interest, you listen to one of your donors, you listen to one of your friends. On the pandemic, none of those pieces are in play. You're making the best decision from your heart for Missourians that you can make, and that's what Mike Parson did.
As the campaign unfolds, you'll come back and talk about it here on This Week in Missouri Politics.
That'd be great. Love to be on anytime.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel, but first, go to showmissouri.com. Mentioned Cass County earlier. You can go to the north end of the burnt district. We'll talk about the birthplace of Carrie Nation, the burial of Dale Carnegie, and I'll tell you the story about the guy who shot the guy that shot Jesse James. Showmissouri.com. We'll be right back after this.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations, and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week of Missouri Politics. Opinion Maker panel time. The full panel now represents Tracy McCreery from St. Louis. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Rasheen, Aldridge, city of St. Louis, right?
Yes, sir.
What part of the city?
All of downtown. So
Downtown.
It's a very diverse district.
Hopefully people will get to come back to your district soon to Busch Stadium and watch baseball.
Yes.
Kelli Dunaway, St. Louis County Councilwoman, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for having me,
And
Scott.
Tim Brinker, our first panel that wasn't super spaced out, though we come back with the first county that came back from COVID, the presiding commissioner of Freedom County, some call it Franklin County, Tim Brinker.
Freedom-loving Franklin. Thanks for having me, Scott.
I have watched you probably have one of the best and most measured responses to COVID in the state. You've been updating folks every week. It seems like you've known something other folks haven't. Focus on your nursing homes, communicate a lot of information, and let free people live as free people. Seems like it's worked.
Yeah, so far it's worked, and we're really pleased with where things are regionally as well as within Franklin County. So we're different than the urban counties of St. Louis County, if you will, as terms of populace and stacking of folks. So we knew from the beginning that it was going to be a different impact to our rural county versus an urban county, if you will.
Has been. That's interesting. You know, folks around the state, I've never seen anything more geographically influenced. If you're from a rural area, you're almost ticked off that people bothered you for no reason. And if you're from an urban area, it's very real.
Right. Well, as of Thursday, we had 62 people in the St. Louis region in intensive care and another 31 on ventilators. So it's still very much a problem in the St. Louis region. So I'm taking it very seriously. But about 30% of the new outbreaks that are happening in Missouri are happening in rural areas, and a lot of that has to do with institutionalized areas like nursing homes and prisons and food processing plants. So Missouri's definitely not out of the woods.
You know, it is interesting. You walk into the state capitol, it is a very diverse state. You walk in there, you have a different view of the world than a lot of people like Rick Francis down in southeast Missouri, and you come from different areas, and COVID really exacerbated those differences.
Yeah, it has, and for us in urban areas, if, we talk about the rural and urban, but it is real, especially for like districts like mine, people of color that don't have healthcare facilities, not sure how they're going to get tested. So I know it's been a lot of folks that's been stepping up in the neighborhood providing tests so people can get tested to be able to kind of get that worry gone. But the reality is that, this thing, it happened in the urban area. I wouldn't say it happened, but it spread it a lot quicker in the urban area. But like Tracy said, now it's starting to pick up in the rural, and it's our new reality. And we have to figure out how do we make sure that we keep everyone safe.
Let me ask you a question. If you want to keep folks safe, can they Google your office, Rasheen Aldridge, or on Twitter, it'd be on the lower third. Can you send them to a place they can get tested, your office?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've been doing while we've been back home since session has ended is on a weekly basis, we've been holding testing sites, working with Affinia, which has been doing a great job providing testing for people to get tested. We provide testing for them as well as working with the Urban League to be able to give them food boxes, because we know that people have lost their jobs. Yep. It's hard for them to be able to support their families. So shout out to Affinia for doing great work.
St. Louis County's been on the forefront, probably the most cases, largest outbreak. What's the status of that now? And is it starting to where you're going to see the light then until them get back to a little bit of normalcy in St. Louis County?
I believe so. I mean, props to St. Louis County government and St. Louis County residents for really stepping up and doing the right thing, staying home, wearing masks, trying really hard to contain the spread. I think that those restrictions have really helped us contain the spread of the disease and have also helped us prepare to reopen safely so that we can get back to some semblance of normalcy.
Tim Brinker, I've seen Local Government Matters. Parson has met with local folks, not just about this, but before. I think it looked good. Now things in rural Missouri are back to normal. There's no state restrictions. State fair is going to happen. Do they have a St. Louis County fair? I don't know if y'all have a fair. Yeah. Well, they have a big one in Sedalia. He's able to start that down the track of reopening. Now there's folks complaining about the ham breakfast. I think folks can go to Sedalia, right, and not have to worry too much about contracting Black Plague or whatever they said was going to happen at the lake.
I'm certainly glad that everybody's re-educated on hand washing.
There you go.
The basics of life and the essentials of cleanliness impact this disease a lot. And I think that we'll see the state fair go on. It'll be a different state fair because of the different restrictions put in place. It will be more of the old school, the cattle fair, if you will. Bring the livestock in, get judged, and nothing wrong with that from rural Franklin either. But we have battled this thing, and we've battled it differently. We've overcome it in a lot of ways. We're going to see cases. It's going to be positive. It's going to be ongoing. And there's nothing that's going to change that. There will be preventions to be put in place to minimize spread. We had 3 additional cases in Franklin to report this morning. We're up to 30 active cases, 12 of which are in long-term care facilities. The others are in throughout the county.
I'm old enough to remember when you were the first county that opened up, everybody said, this is going to be terrible, Blackfoot's going to die. I'm old enough to remember going to the Lake of the Ozarks Memorial Day weekend and said, oh, it's going to be awful, it's going to be awful. Then when it wasn't awful, wait a little bit more, it'll be awful, it's never been awful. Same people say that governor should cancel the ham breakfast. Give me a prediction time. Does the governor let the folks that have been wrong so many times win again and cancel the ham breakfast, or does he have it?
Well, I think the governor has mismanaged the handling of the pandemic generally, but I think it's smart to allow the state fair to go on because the state fair is so important to our agriculture community, and agriculture is Missouri's #1 industry, so we've got to have that state fair there so that our students have a place to compete.
What do you think? Does he have ham breakfast?
I mean, I agree with Tracy. I feel like the handling of this whole pandemic has been done very bad, especially from the top leadership. Has not really been proactive, has been very reactionary. But I think as long as there's precautions being taken, 6 feet, people wearing masks, you're washing your hands, we could beat this thing.
Ham breakfast?
Have the ham breakfast.
Ham breakfast?
Well, you're going to have the ham breakfast. I want
Good.
to say one more thing, though, on Governor Parson's handling of the situation. Last 15 weeks, I've been on a conference call with the governor's office every Thursday or every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Included all the St. Louis regional counties, included Boone County, included Jackson County, included Greene County, and Cass County. The governor has done nothing but reach out and include the entire state from massive population counties that can participate and give input to Dr. Randall Williams. And he has the greatest
like
thesaurus
Goldilocks?
in this mind that I've ever witnessed.
If you're from rural Missouri, it's too much, and if you're from urban Missouri, it's not enough. So
Right.
Let's talk about, obviously, George Floyd. You're someone who's been very outspoken on the protest. Now we're seeing some of the protests change in their dynamic, and people are starting talking about actual policy solutions as to how to move forward. I've seen defund the cops. I've seen make cops part of the solution. Give me a couple of things that you think need to happen now to try to prevent what I don't think anybody in the world would even defend what happened when George Floyd was murdered.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that, here we are again. If we go back from 2014 to Mike Brown or just the Jason Stockley case here in the city of St. Louis, here we are again with another death due to the hands of police officer. And the reason that people like myself are constantly taken to the streets, because the reality is we don't like to necessarily protest every other day, take time away from our family, but we don't see accountability. We don't see accountability within the system when deaths are being occurred from law enforcement officers to people of color. And that is a great thing now. It was kind of slow in Ferguson, but now it seems like we really built up some type of momentum and some foundation where people are really starting to understand that when these situations happen, there needs to be some policies already in place. If it's, banning chokeholds or looking at how we, do our use of force policies, or when, people say defund the police, let me be clear, they're not saying abolish or get rid of. What they're saying is reallocate some of those funds from the police budget and put it back into the communities that need it the most, knowing that we put so much dollars to public safety, and we've been tough on crime for so long, and we have not seen different changes or different outcomes. So how do we reimagine what public safety look like? How do we make sure we invest back into community centers, invest back into strong communities so that we can have strong relationships with communities and police officers?
I think in Missouri, defund the police isn't real. That's not going to happen. What are some things that could happen that might avoid tragedies like this?
Well, I heard Joe Patterson on a radio show last week, and he's saying the same things we are. We are continually asking or dispatching police to deal with things they are neither equipped nor qualified to handle.
Sure.
Things like mental health, drug addiction, homelessness, and I agree with the representative. We need to put more funding in social workers to either work alongside the police on preventive before anybody even enters the criminal justice system, but we also need to make sure that the people who are equipped to handle a lot of these situations that police are called on to deal with have the proper training and the proper empathy and the proper ability to handle it in a way that won't escalate. And I think another thing that we can do and start talking about doing is the police unions are the ones who are defending and protecting police officers who have been charged with some kind of misconduct. I think if we had an independent third party that was dealing with police who have been accused of misconduct, that it would help. Even if it didn't really help what's happening inside the police unions, it would certainly help the public have more confidence that the police unions aren't taking the side of the police officers in situations where they're being accused of misconduct against people in the community.
Tim Brinker, I think you in Franklin County, you either make part of the solution, there won't be a solution.
Well, exactly, and you know we witness our share, our minimal share, due to our minimal populace comparatively. However, you know, I've had 2 of my deputies shot 3 weeks ago in a rundown. A violator was speeding and they got into a chase, and this guy pulls into a convenience store, gets out of his car and shoots a deputy, gets in the car in front of him, shoots that deputy. The deputies fire through a windshield and take the guy down, which was fortunate. Now, in this case, though, it was inexcusable, the action, obviously, and we all need to make sure that these things do not ever occur to anyone on this earth, again, quite frankly. Now, there are measures with which to put in place, and I don't disagree. I think psychologically, I think there are some issues, some gaps that we can certainly fill in terms of education, but I also think there's family values that are missing through the whole core of the system throughout the nation that have been gradually minimizing as we go. And I think there's a lot to be said for opportunities with which to benefit from when education is put forth.
Before we go on to that issue that you've worked on a lot, as the huge Supreme Court ruling this week says you can no longer be fired for being gay. That's something you've advocated strongly for in the past. It's kind of 1/3 of Mona. It's got to be a good week for you.
Oh, it was a huge week, but we're only allowing ourselves to celebrate a little bit. So the Supreme Court issued a landmark decision for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender folks across the nation that says employers can't discriminate in the workplace. So, but you're right, it was okay to celebrate, but we still need to pass the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act at the state level because there are other things besides employment that are critical.
A lot
to
of Kevin
protect.
Engler this week when he was on the floor advocating for that. It's come a long way in a short amount of time, and it looks like there's a clear path going forward.
There has to be, and we just need to send a message as Missouri that we want people to come here and be able to be who they are. It'll help our economy.
It's in our self-interest. I think there's a point where it's in your self-interest to deal with these issues in a more inclusive way.
Exactly.
Tim Brinker, with a minute left, who won the week?
Well, the Cub fans won the week because they didn't have to watch their team lose. But truly, Mike Parson, Governor Parson, just did a yeoman's job, as well as Randall Williams. I just can't pick one, Scott. But those guys handled this thing unlike any other. We were all dealt an unknown.
Sure.
And we dealt with it the way that we saw fit and saw best.
Very Missouri solution.
Monday morning quarterbacking is going to occur, but I can say this from being involved in the process. I was very impressed with how it was handled from the top.
Kelli Dunaway, who won the week?
Who won the week was, in light of DACA and the LGBTQ decision, the United States Supreme Court won the week for showing us that laws matter more than politics.
Who won the week?
I mean, Kelly just stole mine. I was about to say Supreme Court too. But no, yeah, you know, this is something to celebrate, but it's nothing to get too happy about. You know, for our DACA community and our LGBT community that had just a huge victory this week, we have to continue to make sure that more restrictions that are put in place to make people feel equal in the world that they live in is just.
Who won the week?
Nicole Galloway, because the governor's numbers are slipping in the polls and Nicole Galloway's are increasing, and I think that's because Nicole supports health care for folks and has great ideas for how to have better handled the pandemic.
Every week seems like a week for that Medicaid campaign. I'm going to say University of Mizzou. Everybody, Mizzou's easiest people in the state to kick. They sit down with their students, they heard them out, they still made some very logical, sober decisions. Maybe it's a path forward for everybody. We'll see you next week here with Senator Brian Williams on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, SPIRE, and Sterling Bank.